Story, Chuffa in the Wild West. Chuffa and Mr. Driver had been given a job of taking the sheriff and his prisoner from Abilene to Deadwood City. The prisoner was the famous outlaw, Big Bad Jake. "We've got to make it to Deadwood City by sundown," said the sheriff, before the judge leaves town. "We'll never get there on time in that old wreck," sneered Jake, pointing at Chuffa. "Anyway, my boys will find a way to slow us down." Chuffa wasn't too pleased to be called an old wreck, and as they set off he wondered what Jake meant about his boys. All was going well as they chuffed along through prairie. Mr. Driver was singing a cowboy song when suddenly he jammed on the brakes. "Tree on the line up ahead," he shouted. "Now how did that get there?" "I could tell you," said Jake. "Your boys, I suppose." "Jake," said the sheriff, "watch out for a trap, Driver." Finally they managed to heave the tree off the track. "We've lost time," said the sheriff. "Can we speed up?" "We'll do what we can," said Mr. Driver. They clattered along as fast as they could over the prairie. Mr. Driver started singing his cowboy song. Then suddenly he jammed on the brakes again. "What is it this time?" complained the sheriff. "Look ahead," said Mr. Driver. There in the middle of the desert was a large herd of hairy, thirsty buffalo, and they were all crossing the railway track. "We'll never get to Deadwood in time," said the sheriff. Chuffa and Mr. Driver were taking the sheriff and his prisoner, Big Bad Jake, to Deadwood City. They had to get there by sundown, and now there was a herd of buffalo in their way. "They must be looking for the water hole," said Mr. Driver. He jumped out of the driver's cab and led the leader of the herd down to the water hole on the other side of the tracks. The rest of the herd followed. They were very grateful to Mr. Driver and they nodded their thanks. Mr. Driver waited until the last one had crossed the track. Then Chuffa whistled goodbye and they set off again. The sheriff was getting impatient. He said, "Can't you get this train to move any faster? The sun's starting to go down and we're still a long way from Deadwood." "Don't worry, Sheriff," said Mr. Driver, "Chuffa will get us there." They hadn't gone far when Mr. Driver started singing his cowboy song, and then suddenly he jammed on the brakes. "Rocks on the line," said Mr. Driver. "Must be an avalanche." "That's no avalanche," said the sheriff, as a group of riders appeared in the distance. "They're my boys," said Jake. "Well, it looks like I shan't be coming with you to Deadwood City, after all," he smiled. Big Bad Jake's outlaw gang were coming to save him from being taken for trial in Deadwood City. Chuffa gave 3 long blasts on his whistle. That was his distress signal. The outlaws galloped down to the train. The sheriff was just about to give up his prisoner when they heard the distant thunder of hoofs. The outlaws looked around and in the distance they saw a cloud of dust. "Buffalo stampede," they cried. "Quick, let's get out of here." "What about me?" cried Jake after them. "You're coming with us to Deadwood City," smiled the sheriff. The buffalo herd swooped down and chased the outlaws away, scattering them in all directions. "They must have heard our signal, Chuffa," said Mr. Driver. "It just shows it pays to do folks a good turn. Working together, me Driver, the sheriff and a miserable Big Bad Jake soon cleared all the rocks blocking the line. With an extra burst of speed they neared Deadwood City. The sun was setting as Mr. Driver finished his cowboy song and put on the brakes as they drew into Deadwood Station. "Just in time, Mr. Driver," said the sheriff. "Well done, and well done, Chuffa." Off he went with the prisoner. When Mr. Driver and Chuffa arrived back in Abilene the next day, the news of their journey had reached the mayor. "Fine work," said the mayor, giving Mr. Driver a medal and Chuffa an enormous bow to tie round his funnel. "Not bad," said Chuffa to himself. "For an old wreck,